Hey, today I'm going to talk about a televisual tragedy, and I'm going to do it from my personal perspective. I did that earlier this semester with the Challenger shuttle explosion in 1986, and today I'm going to do it talking about the events of September 11th, 2001. So in 1986, with the Challenger shuttle explosion, I was pretty young. I was only like 13 years old, 12 or 13, and here with the events of September 11th, 2001, um, I'm much older, significantly older. I'm in my late 20s. And so this is a day I really remember. And it's interesting how you kind of get these events kind of seared into your memory and how television helps with it. And then we'll look at our materials this week about things like flashbulb memories. How accurate is my memory of what actually happened compared to what did? There's going to be quite a bit that aligns, but I'm certain I'll have a couple of things that are inconsistent because the memory is not perfect. So I'm just going to do this from my own personal recall. So, um, before I went to graduate school and started doing things like teaching like this, I worked in museums as a preparator and handled art. And I was completely done with undergrad, and there was a few years I took off before I went to graduate school. And I was working in my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin, where I'm living now, at the Madison Art Center, it was called then. Now it's the Madison Museum of Contemporary Art. But back then at the Art Center, I was the assistant preparator, and so I would help get the exhibitions ready and everything. And I had not a full time schedule, so I would come in at different times, different days. And I was coming in on this day, and I drove like a little motor scooter, and I was that matters because the Madison Art Center is in downtown Madison, right by the Capitol Square and the Capitol building itself. And usually I would come from across the square, and I would just go on the square itself for like half the square, and then do like the back way to the museum, and then that's how I would park. And I'd been going that route for years and never had a problem. And this time the Capitol Square was barricaded as I came through, and I was like, what's going on? And this was my first inclination that anything had happened. I didn't turn the television on. Um, this is 2001, so people have cell phones, but they're not like smartphones where the internet's right there and you're getting like a feed of everything before you do anything at all. I hadn't turned my computer on. I hadn't looked at email. No one had called to leave me a message about any of this, so I had no idea that any of this was going on. But as I was on my scooter going across Capitol Square, I saw them putting barricades like around the Capitol itself, and these were pretty significant sized concrete barriers, and it was like I just caught it happening, and I was like, what's happening? And that was like the first instinct that I had that there was something wrong. And I lived really close to the museum, so I'd probably only left my house like 5 minutes before that. And then in just a minute or two after, they let me through. The people, they knew I wasn't doing anything, just had to wait for them to get their barriers, and then they were like, stay off the square the rest of the day or whatever. And I was like, okay. And then I went to the museum, and I think I had to get off my scooter and walk it. And then I went down State Street then, which is a pedestrian street, so you can't ride your scooter or you can't ride anything but a bicycle. And so since I had to walk, I went that way anyway because it was faster. And then I kind of saw some stuff, like people seemed concerned, or I kind of caught a flutter of activity. But in a block or so, I was at my job, and I just parked my scooter and I went in like I always did. And as I went to punch in at the time clock, like I had to go past the main receptionist. No one was there. It was like weird, that building. It felt empty, but I knew I could feel people there, but like no one was at their desk. And like I'd come to this job like every day, 5 days a week for a couple of years now, and like no one's where they're supposed to be. And then I punch in, and then I like look around, and everyone in the entire office was gathered around a tiny television. It was like super small, like one you take camping, like a 4-inch screen that me and my boss would watch back in the museum shop, like when a basketball game was on, like when the Badgers were in the NCAA tournament, we'd put on our tiny television. And but he had grabbed it like in the moment and put it on, and like everyone was gathered around it watching, and it was like, I think what had happened was right then the second towers had exploded and it had cut like all the news, and I came in and I was just like, what's going on? I had no idea what was happening at all. I knew it was terrible, and I saw the building kind of blowing up and smoke and stuff like that, but I didn't really understand that we'd already had one building get hit until I saw replays of the news later. So I was still kind of like trying to process what was happening, and like someone took me aside or whatever, and they was like, "Did you see the first building go down?" And I was like, "What?" And they were like, "There's been 2 explosions now. Both of the twin towers have been hit." And then like a little nagging thing in the back of my head was like, "Wait, doesn't my brother work down near there?" And I was got kind of worried or whatever. And my brother, he's usually a Midwesterner and lives in Minneapolis, but he had recently taken a job out east, and he was living in Philadelphia, but he spent quite a bit of time at the office in Manhattan, and he was not at the Twin Towers that day. Thank God. But not 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 I did not know that at the time, and I had just started to feel like a little bit of concern, and I was like, oh, does my brother have to go to the Manhattan office this week, or is he okay in Philadelphia? And then the third place he would work was Washington, D.C., so he kind of did like a triple thing, and he's like the highly successful businessman brother, and it's a whole different life than I've ever known, and this was his big East, move. And right when I started having those worries, right when I started feeling that, like a minute or two later, my sister called the museum phone. And this was pretty rare for me to get a phone call. And I went and took it, and it was her. And she goes, just in case you're worrying, our brother, Cal is his name, our brother Cal is okay. He's already checked in. Everything is fine. And she actually worked at the same company as he did. So she had gotten like an internal check-in that I didn't get for quite a while from him personally, so that was really kind of awesome. And I knew that he was okay. And then I started worrying about my friends in New York City. And one of my really, really good friends had taken a trip that, just that week from Madison to go to a friend of hers. And she ended up coming back with photographs of the entire like event. And it was pretty crazy to see that kind of firsthand photos, even though I'd seen, the news nonstop. And one of my really, really good friends I went to college with, he was living in Manhattan at the time, and he's a piano tuner, and like, I checked in with him as soon as you could. You couldn't get through to anyone for, like, a while. It was like all the cell phones were jammed, and this was, like, early cell phone time, and, like I said, there wasn't huge amounts of other ways to connect with people, like a check-in on Facebook Live that you're safe or something. It wasn't like that. It was like the phones were jammed and you just couldn't get through. And then finally someone would call who was like related to someone to let you know that they were okay, and they had like a phone tree type of thing, because once they got through to like one person, they knew they might not be able to get through to everyone, so then like their friends would have to check in on other friends. And that's what was going on with my buddy Adam. And finally I got a check-in that he was okay, and I was like super relieved. And then I talked to him a couple weeks later, and this is kind of disgusting, kind of gross, but it really kind of personalizes what happened, and I kind of think that really matters in tragic events like this that we see mainly through the screen. Well, Adam lived in Manhattan, and he was a piano tuner, and he would have to go to his job at the Steinway factory every day. And he said that by the time that he got home, after like going out into the world and everything, and then coming back into his apartment, that the stench was just so bad from the decaying bodies, from the burning, from all of it, that he would, he lived in this like teeny tiny little, New York City apartment, and the stench of his clothes was just so horrible that every day that he came home, he would have to bag his clothes or directly go to the washing machine. And he didn't have a washing machine like in his unit, and it was everyone was kind of doing this, so that's how he developed the bag system. And so he would just like immediately step in his door, strip all of his clothes off, put it in a bag it up, put it in a closet, and go take a shower, get on fresh clothes for the evening at home. And you couldn't open up your windows, and there was not like fresh air for quite some time. And so, he, hearing his stories for me really made what happened on September 11th, 2001, a lot more personal. And I hope hearing a story from me, your instructor, even though I'm not from New York and I wasn't anywhere near the vicinity, but just hearing about my own experience in one of the 50 capital cities where they were closing down. Every state capital had protections put on it, like within minutes. People everywhere in all 50 states and the territories were ready for attack. And so it was a pretty crazy moment. And then TV was really around the clock. It wasn't like the Four Dark Days we studied with John F. Kennedy in the 1960s. And the main reason for that is the number of channels. But even things like Animal Planet for days after this would have like a connection to someone at September 11th and the cats that they kept at the fire station or something like that. I mean, it was, pretty close to around the clock coverage of one event that I've ever seen in my lifetime. Happened for September 11th as well. And of course, there were some channels where you could escape from it, so it wasn't to that same level. But those images of the planes hitting the towers, the images of the plane hitting the Pentagon, those were, very vividly watched over and over and over. And the repetition on television is partially how these images get seared into your mind. And so that's just something to consider as you're looking at our studies this week. And again, I hope you found the personal account interesting, and it makes what's starting to become a little bit of, history a little bit further away, a little bit more relevant to you today. Thank you for your attention.